Not all Intel 13th Gen CPUs will be based on the new Raptor Lake architecture. In fact, quite a few of the soon-to-be released processors are still based on the older Alder Lake design, including some of the most interesting parts. To get you up to speed and make sure you know what you are buying, we will take a look at the upcoming Intel 13th Gen CPU lineup and uncover which parts are actually Raptor Lake and which are still based on Alder Lake. Then we will talk about the reasons companies are reusing older parts across CPU generations and why it doesn't have to be a bad deal after all. Without further ado, let's dive right in. To figure out which upcoming CPUs will be based on what architecture, we first have to talk about the Alder Lake chips Intel is currently producing. All 12th Gen Alder Lake processors are based on only two different CPU dies. Intel only taped out two chips in order to supply all of their 12th Gen parts. The largest Alder Lake die, designated Revision C-0, contains 8 big performance cores and 8 small efficiency cores. This chip has a die size of about 250mm squared and supplies all the high-end SKUs that come with performance and efficiency cores. The i9 12900 variants are based on the full die with all 8P and 8E cores active. The i7 12700 variants also use the C-0 die, but 4 of the E cores are disabled, resulting in an 8+4 configuration. For the i5 variants, it's a bit more difficult. While the i5 12600K and KF are also based on the larger C0 die in a 6+4 configuration, the i5 12600 non-K is already based on a different chip. This so-called H-0 die only contains 6 performance cores and 0 efficiency cores, and is smaller at only 163mm squared. As a result, the i5 12600 isn't just a lower clock 12600K, it is based on a physically different chip. Same with the 12500 and the 12400 variants. Although some of the 12400 parts can actually be based on the larger C0 die with all E cores and 2 P cores disabled. Basically a super bin version, so Intel can use C0 chips where all the E core clusters have defects. Finally, the smallest i3 12100 is also based on the H-0 die, but with only 4 active performance cores. As you can see, Intel designed and taped out only 2 chips for Alder Lake, and they use these chips to supply all their 12th Gen CPUs. The higher end parts are based on the C0 die in various bin versions, and the lower end chips use the smaller H-0 die. So how is this important for the 13th Gen CPUs? We already have a leaked parts list for the upcoming Raptor Lake generation, which lists all the different SKUs from the i9 13900K all the way down to the i3 13100. And this parts list, most likely from a big retailer, not only shows the CPU names, clock speeds, TDP, core and cache setups, but also which chip revisions they are based on. I'm sure you have guessed it by now, some of these parts are actually based on the older Alder Lake C0 and H0 dies. For its 13th Gen core generation, Intel is only releasing a single new Raptor Lake die, designated Revision B-0. It comes with 8 Raptor Cove performance and 16 Grace mode efficiency cores, plus more cache on all levels from L2 to L3. This B-0 die is used to supply the new high-end lineup. All the i9 and i7 parts are always based on the true Raptor Lake die. But when we go down into the i5 range, it's getting a bit more complicated again. But this time the differences are harder to spot. We already talked about the fact that the Alder Lake i5 12600K is based on the larger C0 die, while the similarly named 12600 is based on the smaller H0 version. But this difference is also obvious when we look at the specs of these CPUs, since the 12600K is a 6+4 configuration, while the 12600 non-K has no E cores at all. But when we compare the i5 13600K with the 13600, both CPUs have the same 6+8 configuration. Only this time the 13600K is based on the new Raptor Lake B-0 die, while the 13600 is using the older Alder Lake C-0 die. If you don't know that, you might go for the non-K version because of the lower TDP, or maybe you're not overclocking anyways. But instead of the same CPU, as you would expect, just with lower clock speeds and TDP, you're getting a different chip with a different architecture. It's the same with all other mid to entry level 13th Gen CPUs. The i5 13500, the 13400 and the i3 13100 are all based on older Alder Lake C0 or H0 die. Only i9, i7 and the i5K versions are actually Raptor Lake CPUs. Rebranding older CPU dies for a new generation is nothing we haven't seen before. Both Intel and AMD have done it in the past, and it also happens with GPUs. Taping out a couple of new chips is a huge cost factor, especially if you're Intel and all your CPUs are still monolithic. Relying on last-gen chips for the entry-level CPU parts is a pretty large cost-saving factor. And since Alder Lake and Raptor Lake use the same socket 1700 and are pin compatible, it's also really easy to implement. Literally all Intel has to do is flash a new firmware, put on a new stamp on the CPU, update the packaging material, and done is your new 13th gen CPU. For me personally, the important question is, how is it executed? Are they trying to fool their customers? Is it transparent? Or are there even benefits? Especially the i5 13400 being an older Alder Lake part can be concerning, since the i5 12400 is one of the best Alder Lake parts when it comes to price performance, and as such it is very likely that the 13400 will also sell very well. Consumers might think they are buying a new Raptor Lake chip, when in fact they are not. But when we compare the CPU configurations, the new old 13th gen i5 SKUs also offer more than their 12th gen counterparts. This time all the i5s will keep some of the efficiency cores enabled, instead of only using performance cores. While all three 12th gen non-K i5 CPUs only have 6 P cores enabled, both the i5 13600 and 13500 are supposed to come with a 6+8 configuration, and the 13400 drops down to 6+4. So yes, you are getting older generation Alder Lake CPUs, rebranded as 13th gen, but you also get more powerful processors at the same time. Depending on how much IPC increase Raptor Lake delivers and the specific pricing of the re-released Alder Lake parts, they still could turn out to be a good deal. The only part where I am not okay with the rebranding is the i3 3100, because it is based on the exact same H-0 die as the i3 12100 and even has the same 4+0 configuration. It's literally the same CPU with a 100 MHz higher base clock dressed in a new name. That's something I cannot support. Not everything is as it seems, and not every CPU branded 13th gen is actually Raptor Lake. I don't mind rebranding for some parts, especially if the base architecture is pretty similar and the rebranded parts are getting more and better features. A i5 13500 with its 6 performance and 8 efficiency cores is basically a mix between a i5 12600K and an i7 12700K. Not a bad deal if the price is right. It will also depend on how much of an improvement Raptor Lake turns out to be. If we get a decent IPC and clock speed bump, buying a rebranded older Alder Lake chip could hurt more. I think with Intel's next-gen CPUs, almost all parts can be a good deal if the pricing is on point and you know what you're buying. And we have to keep in mind that all of this is still based on leaks and could change at any time before launch, though I think it's unlikely. If something does change in the future, I will pin a comment down below the video to let you know. If you're interested in a more in-depth look at Raptor Lake, check out my deep dive video. Of course, I want to know your opinion on rebranding shenanigans like this. Are you okay with Intel using older Alder Lake parts for their 13th gen lineup? Do you think they still could offer good value? And are you maybe even considering buying a new old Alder Lake CPU? Leave a comment down below. I'm looking forward to your input. I hope you found this video helpful and see you in the next one.